It's time to wake up, dear. The lack of spirituality present in the contemporary world has left humanity in a position of absolute defenselessness. We work for the sake of working. We express opinions for the sake of expressing opinions. We walk just for the sake of walking, and most alarmingly, we think just for the sake of thinking. Let me warn you that it is not brave to let go of an ethical code without any justification other than blind intuition, but rather to be capable of constructing a set of rules, principles, values, beliefs, and patterns of behavior that give meaning to your path. I was the first fool to let myself be carried away by the wind. I still remember my past mistakes. After abandoning theocentrism, my moral and spiritual emptiness led me to the deepest misery. I had no certainty in anything or anyone. I didn't know why I had been placed in this world or what was expected of me. But I rose again, not because I returned to God, but because I discovered a way of life that would restore my life's purpose and that of thousands of people: Stoicism. Thus, the need to set things straight became too pressing to ignore. It was time to craft 10 new maxims for my new religion, and today is the day I share them with you. Before continuing, I would appreciate it if you could like the video, as it helps me spread this philosophy to more people. If you don't want to miss any videos, subscribe and hit the bell. Also, if you want to learn more about Stoicism and continue transforming your life, we encourage you to check out the books listed in the description below. These books are filled with valuable insights and practical advice from the great Stoic philosophers like Zeno, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca. Whether you're looking to build inner strength, find serenity, or achieve a balanced life, these books are essential guides. By purchasing books through the links we share, you help us continue creating content. After each victory of the Roman Empire, most of the people would turn their gaze to the victorious general who marched at the head of his mighty army of knowledge, honor, glory, and prestige. What more could one ask for? However, behind the social elitism was the timid voice of an anonymous helper, unknown and ignored by the popular masses, who in the midst of the euphoric uproar whispered to the commander, "Remember, you too will die." Faced with such a statement, the commander paraphrased a phrase from a certain Lucius Annaeus Seneca that was circulating through the city: "Let us live as if the end of our lives has already arrived." Despite its bitter appearance, reminders like this are what one needs most often, not just in moments of celebration, but in the most absolute despair. If we consume every ounce of our existence by completely ignoring the most obvious of thoughts, and to make matters worse, do everything possible to pretend that it's not true, very often our ego shuns any object, whether concrete or abstract, that might show us that the external reality is at odds with our internal narrative. Remember, we are all going to die, said the wisest man, for he did just the opposite of other men. He listened to his fears. Marcus Aurelius said that the mere fact that you could cease to exist at any moment should determine what you think, say, and do. Memento mori consists of reflecting and meditating on life itself, for it is ultimately what gives life meaning, priority, and perspective. It's then that time becomes a gift, a treasure. Don't waste it. It's the only thing worth being greedy for. Once your consciousness is infused with the awareness of death, it's time to return to life. We begin the journey down the Calle della Sabura, the most popular stretch of ancient Rome, where all sorts of retail trades flourished: goldsmiths, blacksmiths, potters, carpenters, dyers, tanners, barbers. Among them was a man with the soul of an artist who dedicated himself to making and selling mirrors of all shapes and sizes. While some of them respected the original outline of the clients, others were designed for caricature purposes, thus distorting the image of those who were reflected in them. The life of the merchant was not easy, for the performance of his economic activity determined whether his household ate well or suffered from hunger, much hunger. Despite everything, our protagonist was perfectly aware of the potential risks of his activity. The belief that got him up every morning was very simple: this is my thing. It must be this way and no other. His responsibility towards the unfolding of things was predetermined. His deterministic approach was impossible for his acquaintances to understand. "How can you think that everything that happens to you happens for a specific reason?" they reproached him. For the average artisan, his entrepreneurial epic would end there. However, when a Stoic is clear about his path and knows how to enjoy the process, it's only a matter of time before he falls madly in love with the order of events that unfold in his life. One ordinary day, a child entered the shop and asked the artisan why he loved creating mirrors so much. His answer could only be, "Amor fati." It is destiny that has given me this mission. It was not by chance, but causal. No one creates mirrors with such madness and passion. I only hope that when someone looks into them, they see themselves as well as I see myself. self. Zeno of Citium mentions in the Republic that people need to forge true self-esteem by starting to develop the capacity for self-criticism. Often, man tends to overestimate his virtues and underestimate his flaws, just as he tends to overestimate the flaws and underestimate the virtues of others. One of the most useful skills one can cultivate is learning to judge oneself accurately and honestly, looking inward to discern where we excel, where we can improve, and where we must improve will greatly facilitate unlocking our human potential. Some resist the idea of self-evaluation because they fear it might mean self-denigration. But one thing has nothing to do with the other. Identifying and polishing one's limitations does not imply denigrating oneself with cheap accusations and bad judgments. Rather, recognizing mistakes is the quickest path to constant incremental improvement. As Epictetus aptly points out, just as a bunch of grapes or a fig, excellence does not spring from nothing. To those who desire a fig, I will say, be patient. First, you must let the fig tree bloom, water it, and then wait for it to bear fruit and mature. It is no secret that Seneca enjoyed great wealth as an advisor to Emperor Nero. The truth is that he had carte blanche to acquire all kinds of extravagant luxuries and hedonistic whims. However, permission does not equal will, and the Roman was no exception. Far from squandering his economic resources on the mundane and superfluous, his great diligence allowed him to adopt a mindset of preparation against man's principal enemy, misfortune. With great cynical suitability, he warned Nero, "It is in times of security that the spirit must prepare for future setbacks. One must take advantage of those moments when the goddess Fortuna smiles. For one day she smiles, and the next she punishes. Those who have not strengthened themselves while they could will suffer the consequences of her tantrums." His advice was to reserve a certain number of days each month to practice poverty, going hungry, wearing poor clothing, and working from sunrise to sunset. In short, in Fortuni Vivente, comfort is the worst slavery to which man is exposed, for it conditions him inexorably to the fear that something or someone will take it away. And if there is one thing certain in this life, it is that every stroke of fortune will be countered by another of misfortune. No one knows when or how, but it is certain that misfortune will eventually manifest. Therefore, in order to reject the warm mantle of comfort, one must adopt frugality as a habit, live only with what is just and necessary, prepare for hardship, and become aware that good and bad times are as fleeting as life itself. In relation to the previous commandment, Zeno of Citium speaks to us in the following way, regarding sobriety and peace of mind. They must be achieved through equanimity in the face of pleasure and pain. Man controls the world when he manages to control himself. This is how he introduces the concept of apacheia, which consists of a mental state in which a person is free from emotional disturbances. Aware of the possible misinterpretations of this maxim, Zeno warns, apathy does not equate to apacheia, for the latter consists in the absolute annulment of emotion. Note that we are not talking about indifference to pleasure and pain or mere apacheia, but about equanimity. In contemporary psychology, the concept of apacheia would translate to intrapersonal intelligence, while metria apacheia would translate to apathy. The detractors of Stoicism misinterpret this principle, believing that apacheia is characterized by the absence of emotions, both positive and negative. Nothing could be further from the truth. Adopting an attitude of indifference to passions places the subject in a state of detachment from reality, which inevitably leads to chaos. My definition of a wise Stoic is one who transforms fear into prudence, error into initiation, pain into metamorphosis, anger into motivation, uncertainty into curiosity, and desire into enterprise. We do not suppress emotions. We identify, understand, and manage them. Emotional volatility must be adjusted according to the volatility of extrinsic events. Put more simply, since the reigning chaos in nature brings with it celebrations and disappointments without prior notice or permission, the best long-term strategy is to control uncontrolled euphoria in moments of splendor, and at the same time, limit melancholy in moments of distress. Aristotle had been warning us, virtue lies in the middle ground between excesses and deficiencies of emotion. Remember, apacheia and sobriety, temperance and serenity, metria apacheia, apathy, and indifference. In the 6th book of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius emphasizes meditation as a clarifying and therapeutic habit for our consciousness. However, there is a slight nuance to it. His way of meditating has little to do with avant-garde techniques, but rather considers it an act of intimate connection and interdependence with the universal matter. This is a conception very much shared by other Stoics like Zeno of Citium. To think that we are different from our fellow humans is merely a perceptual illusion of our species. For him, all things are mutually interconnected and therefore inherently exhibit affinity, harmony, and unity. The emperor summed it up perfectly with a simple analogy. What is bad for the hive is bad for the bee. The harmful effects may not be so direct and intuitive at first, but don't be deceived by the despicable matter. If the neighbor suffers, you suffer. When the world suffers, we all suffer. In short, humanity is waging a constant battle because it has yet to realize that it is part of a single organism. The solution is simple: sympathize. And if this point is equivalent to interpersonal intelligence, the word sympathy comes from the Greek synapacheia, which literally means suffer together. One is sympathetic when they emotionally synchronize with another person, whether to share joy, tears, or lust. We are not only talking about the ability to understand what emotion another person is experiencing, but also to match that emotional state with our own. The Stoics called the first empathy and the second solidarity. Modern psychology calls them cognitive empathy and affective empathy. In any case, the idea is clear. The neighbor, too, laughs, cries, suffers, grumbles, yawns, and dies, makes decisions based on their biological, social, cultural, environmental, and stochastic cards. Therefore, the Stoic concept of absolute unity is nothing more than a plea to look out for both the common good and the individual good. The way to achieve this is to learn to listen, understand, and sympathize with others. After all, although we may not understand their essence, we share the same substance. Plato firmly stated, whenever one wishes to engage in conversation with another person, it is necessary to adopt a panoramic view from above. Marcus Aurelius picked up on Plato's writings and delved even deeper into the panoramic view the Greek referred to. Adopting a bird's-eye view allows us to see everything at once. Armies, commerce, banquets, ceremonies, births and deaths, noisy courts and quiet deserts, different people and elements intermixed and organized in a ridiculous combination of opposites. It is here that the Roman alludes to the concept of sympathy to give global meaning to the cosmos. Remember, everything is interconnected. The purpose of this exercise is to take a step back, reduce the zoom, and contemplate life from a point of view infinitely greater than our own. It is then that one can understand how incredibly insignificant humans are, with their daily problems, idyllic expectations, and fleeting pleasures. What great audacity to conceive oneself as the center of a universe capable of eradicating us with a simple, random breath. In the words of Pierre Jadot, taking perspective changes the valuation of things. Lust for complexity, power, honor, fame. Everything we know becomes laughable. Admitting one's own insignificance is the first step to a pearl that this philosophy hides: moral neutrality. Again, this principle must not be taken out of context, as it does not refer to actions but to events. In other words, our actions are indeed susceptible to being good or bad, but external circumstances and random events have no moral weight. At first, internalizing this point can be somewhat difficult. How can the diagnosis of a chronic illness, the death of a loved one, or a natural disaster not be bad? However, if you think about it carefully, you will realize that evil per se does not reside in the occurrence of randomness. Epicurus was the first to formalize the following precept: things are not good or bad in themselves, but the way we interpret them. Choose not to be harmed, and you will not feel harm. Suppose you are trying to help someone who refuses to cooperate with you, who keeps complaining and thinks they are always right. Instead of seeing it as an unpleasant obstacle to be eliminated, you have before you a golden opportunity to polish virtuous values such as patience, tolerance, seriousness, temperance, and respect. If you are able to extrapolate this ability to all areas of your life, you have won the game. We cannot change what has happened, but we can change our perspective on whether what has happened will lead us to do good or bad actions. The decision to reinterpret reality, which has nothing to do with altering, modifying, or masking it, is yours alone. For this reason, the way we understand what happens to us is much more important than what happens to us in itself. Marcus Aurelius left behind an extraordinary phrase: the impediment in action facilitates action. The obstacle is not a stone in the road, it's the road itself. In his discourse on tranquility, Epictetus frames as a piece of advice that litigants should keep in mind that no matter how much they have trained their persuasion skills, they will not always be able to convince judges and senators. The issue here is to what extent changing someone else's opinion is a factor that depends on us. A good Stoic will focus on polishing their speech, reorganizing their arguments, and encouraging listeners to reconsider their positions. But they will never attribute the outcome of winning or losing to the result of the litigation. It is precisely the actions that fall within our area of influence that one should focus on, even if the final decision is in the hands of the judge. No one can take away the litigant's control over their thoughts, desires, and actions. If internal management is good enough, no circumstance has the potential to eradicate their arsenal of beliefs, values, and behaviors. The universe and the gods may decide whether the tree of effort bears fruit, but they will never be able to prevent the planting of the seed. Cicero's writings provide a very illustrative example of this. An archer can practice countless hours a day, choose the sturdiest bow and the best arrow, maintain these tools, and focus until the second he fires. What happens the moment the arrow leaves the bow? This is where control ends. A gust of wind could deflect the shot's trajectory, or the target could move, especially if it's an enemy soldier or a swift animal. For this reason, Stoics consider it ridiculous to link the archer's self-esteem and self-worth to whether he hit the target or not. What truly matters is what remains within his area of control. That is, what depends on him. If something does not depend on you, dedicating your valuable time to lamentation and weeping makes no practical sense. Thus, the dichotomy of control can be synthesized in this gem from Epictetus. If I am going to die, I will die when the time comes. Since it seems to me that the time has not yet come and I am hungry, I will eat. Cicero's speeches contain a serious warning. Keep a close eye on those friends and family whose behavior is linked to moral vice. Sometimes one must choose between giving up bad company to progress or keeping them to feel loved. However, there is no worse deal than buying temporary love that inevitably leads to permanent stagnation. I am aware that much of the audience is endowed with high levels of empathy and humility, which is why they may ask, is putting up with someone's flaws really that bad? As with most ethical issues life presents, the answer is, it depends. Tolerance and assertiveness are indispensable tools in human relationships, and their absence condemns many to loneliness. But of course, one must accept others' differences, and as mentioned earlier, interpret them as training to put apacheia and synapacheia into practice. However, as Aristotle said, everything has its limits, and I can assure you that dealing with individuals lacking respect, kindness, and consideration is no exception. Certain people's prolonged presence carries an extremely high emotional cost. If you surround yourself with grumpy, lazy, and melancholic people 24 hours a day, how do you think you will end up? Seneca declared, "To morally blame those who choose to limit harmful influences is a sign of ignorance." When one sees that someone is continuously contributing negatively to their growth and predicts that they will continue to drag them down in the medium or long term, the best thing they can do both for themselves and the other is to limit their presence or say goodbye. Do not forget the words of Gomez, "Tell me who you walk with and I'll tell you who you are." It is time to bring together all the concepts discussed, connecting Greek and Latin terminology with titles in Spanish, so that you never forget these 10 principles. Condense years of reading into less than 30 seconds. Awareness of death, love of destiny, admission of mistakes, frugal living, intrapersonal intelligence, integral perspective, moral neutrality, internal locus of control, virtuous circle. From here, it is you who builds your own path. Moral evolution does not consist of completely erasing your old maxims, but of subjecting them to scrutiny to decide which ones stay, which ones go, and finally to include new principles. Part of my ethical code, as well as yours, has notable Judeo-Christian influences. I forgive and ask for forgiveness. I treat others as I would like to be treated. I do not covet others' goods, and I am deeply grateful for the good things life gives me. It is high time you also establish your own rules. Believe me, it is the only thing no one can take away from you, even if you end up losing your eyes. I hope this video helps you achieve the goals you set for yourself. If this is your first time on the channel, we ask you to help us by subscribing and liking the video. This way we can continue creating more content like this in the future. Remember, stay strong, stay positive, and stay true to yourself. Until next time.